Good morning and welcome today to your GCSE AQA history walkthrough for question 5 on the America paper. So as with any of our questions, we need to be first of all reading the question and understanding what the question is asking us about. So first of all, the question for question 5 asks us, in what ways were the lives of Americans affected by the civil rights campaigns? Explain your answer. 8 marks. So what's really important here is I've read the question and now I'm going to ask myself, what part of USA history is this question asking me about? And the answer here is really simple. It's asking me about the civil rights campaigns. And now I'm going to ask myself, well, what else is the question asking me about? And I can see that the question is also asking me about how the lives of Americans were affected. So in what ways were the lives of Americans affected? And by affected, you need to be changing that word affected to changed. So in what ways were the lives of Americans changed? And that's the 2 parts to your answer. Now, you may have noticed that it is 8 marks. So that will tell us it's going to be around 10 minutes to answer. 2 paragraphs are going to be needed for 4 marks. However, first of all, let's have a look at what it takes to get a level 2 on this question. Remember, if we get a level 2 on every question, we will be hitting our half marks for history GCSE and we will be getting that pass mark. So, the answer starts off as following. The Civil Rights Campaign saw peaceful protests throughout America, such as the March on Washington in 1963. So straight away, I've used the language of the question. I've explained what the Civil Rights Campaign is, peaceful protests throughout America, and I've given a specific example. So when you see a tick, this means detail. When you see 2 ticks, it's specific detail. So for example, peaceful protest is a tick, March on Washington is specific, as is 1963. So straight away, just by telling me something about the Civil Rights Campaign, I've picked up 1 to 2 marks, just by doing that. So what else do I know about the March on Washington? Well, it was where 250,000 people marched on Washington to demand civil rights for African Americans. So again, 250,000 people, that specific detail. In addition, there were other peaceful protests, such as sit-ins, where African Americans would go in and sit at a white-only cafe and be abused. So again, sit-ins. So this would probably get me up to 2 marks, if not 3 marks. But the problem here is I am just telling you about the civil rights campaigns. Now I know you can all do that. If you need to, you can just tell me as much as you can about what the question is asking us about the USA, and that's what this answer does here. Now, what the person then goes on to do is they go and try and explain the ways it affects Americans. So it then says, the African Americans did this to highlight the unfairness of their treatment. Okay, so it kind of changed because it began to highlight more the unfairness of their treatment. How many marks would this get us? Well, actually, this paragraph would probably get us 3 out of 8 marks on its own, just because of the level of detail that's used and there is an attempt to explain. But there is also a second paragraph underneath. So I've then gone on to talk about another group within the civil rights movement. So the civil rights campaign saw the Black Power movement come into existence. The Black Power movement were okay with the use of violence. So again, what I've done there is I've given a specific example. I've told you a little bit about the Black Power movement. Here, I'm still on around 3 to 4 because I either need some more detail or I need some more explanation. And I've then gone on to say, well, this had an important impact because it would have made African Americans feel safe as they felt like someone would protect them from white people. So that's how their lives have changed. They feel protected. Okay, and I've used another bit of specific evidence here saying racists were part of law enforcement, so African Americans needed protecting. And that's some specific example there. So this answer, there's a lot here, but it's only going to get me 4 out of 8 marks. So what I need to see to get more, and I'm going to show you this in a moment, is I need to see more of the pink bits. I need to see different groups being talked about in terms of change and more explanation around the change. However, a lot of us might not feel comfortable doing that. So to get those half marks, you just tell me as much as you can about whatever the historical topic is. So whether it's civil rights campaigns here, look, I just told you here as much as I can about 2 different parts of the civil rights campaigns, and I've picked up marks. If you then do a little bit of pink, you'll get into your half marks. You'll get that 4 marks out of 8, which is what we want. But by just doing the green, you can get at least 3. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at how to get a really, really top answer, top mark. Top of level 3, level 4, 6, 7, 8 marks, and you'll be needing this if you want to get your grade 8 to 9. So again, just a reminder that a tick is detail, 2 ticks is specific detail, the pink is different groups, different ways in which the lives of Americans were changed, and the civil rights campaign, just information on it, is the green. I'm also going to just underline in purple my explanation, so how it follows on from each sentence, which I think is a really important thing to do. So I'm just going to write purple is follow on. And then I'm also going to highlight a really good tip for level 4. So in yellow, not yellow actually, yeah, yellow. In yellow, I'm going to highlight the level 4, which is the groups / the social, economic, political. So let's start off then. I'm just going to start off by telling the marker what I know about the Civil Rights Campaign. So the Civil Rights Campaign saw peaceful protests throughout America, such as Dr. King's March on Washington in 1963. So we can see straight away there, we've got peaceful protests, we've got Dr. King, so Martin Luther King, his March on Washington in 1963. Straight away that's picking me up 2 marks because of the level of detail that's there. Now, I know now I need to talk about straight away how will the lives of Americans changed here. I'm going to underline the March on Washington because that's what I want to talk about in my next sentence. Who did that impact? Which group did it impact? So for my level 4, I'm going to be talking about here, it had a huge impact on the lives of African Americans. So why did it have a huge impact on the lives of African Americans? Well, because it was the largest ever protest in US history. And then I'd be saying, right, so what if it was the largest ever protest? How does that affect African Americans? Well, it shows the size of support within the civil rights movement, or which the civil rights movement had, which making African Americans feel heard and that there was hope. So again, so what if there was a lot of support? In turn, this had a huge impact on presidents. So I've moved away now from presidents, from African Americans. I'm talking about another group such as presidents, on the presidents of the 1960s, as it was hard to ignore the will of the people. So what if it's hard to ignore the will of the people? Well, if it's hard to ignore the will of the people, this meant it made political sense for Kennedy and Johnson to push the Civil Rights Act through, and the Civil Rights Act ended legal racism in America. So as you can see here, this is all about different groups and how they changed, how this March on Washington changed them. So how it changed African Americans, how it changed Presidents Kennedy and Johnson. So that there is 4 out of 8 on its own. Yeah, potentially 5 because you've talked about 2 different groups. And we just need another one of these paragraphs to get me full marks. So I'm going to start off again. What do I know about the Civil Rights Campaign? Well, there was the Black Power movement, Nation of Islam, and the Black Panther Party, who advocated for the use of violence. So again, I've not just said the Black Power movement, I've used details, Nation of Islam, Black Panther. Okay, so who did this have an impact on? Whose lives did this change? Well, I've started to talk about it changed the lives of white supremacists, as they would use the example, they'd now use this example of how African Americans posed a threat to America because of the violence. So what if they were able to use African Americans as a threat to America? As a result, they could use this to turn more white people against African Americans. So what if they could turn more white people against African Americans? Well, it meant that they could further the divide between the races, and as you can see here, I've mentioned the social divide. So what we have here again is some really detailed sentence, and then a really good explanation that all follows on from each other to explain how the lives of people changed. Now, as an examiner, I'm looking here. I can see that they've talked about the Civil Rights Campaign in both paragraphs. I can see that they've explained the way the lives of Americans have changed in the purple, and each sentence follows on. So that's going to get me 6, okay? The bit that's going to push me into 7 or 8 is the different groups. So the different groups, African Americans, presidents, talking about political, talking about another different group, white supremacists, and then talking about social. That is going to push me into my level 4. Now, if you can't or don't feel comfortable with social and political, leave them and just focus on the groups, because that in itself will get you into level 4. Now, what's really important here to look at is a common mistake that people do, because I've told you now to use, for example, groups or social, economic and political. Now, if I go back to this answer here, the 4 out of 8 marks one, what some of you have done and started doing is said, for example here, the African Americans did this to highlight the unfairness of their treatment, and you might say, in the hopes they would get social/political fairness. So that there, you've used those words. However, if you look, you're not going to get into level 4 just by doing that. You need to do the level of detail in your explanation first. So don't just do one sentence using those words, because that is not going to get you to pick up marks. You need to follow the structure that I've given you. And the structure is, you talk about the Civil Rights Campaign, you talk about different groups, and then in your answer, if you can, talk about economic and political and different groups. If you can't, that's fine. Just write about the general impact. Okay? But don't just jump to doing this, because it won't get you any marks. So, just to repeat and finish off what's good about this answer, it discusses Civil Rights Campaign twice. It discusses how it changed the lives of Americans to get into your level 3. Everything follows on, so it's developed. So you can see that by the purple. And then for your top marks, it's talked about different groups.